Hello and welcome to the 110th developer update. With me, I have the one and only Kushti. How you doing, Kushti?
Hi everyone, my pleasure to be here again.
Thanks for joining us. I think we'll try to make this a tradition of having you at every 10 intervals. So we had you at 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, all the way up. We'll see if we can catch in for these, kind of to bring everything back down to center and then expand from there, come back down again, and then go from there. All right. So since I have you here, you're stuck here. You can't go anywhere. You said it's storming outside, so you can't run away. I figured I'd have some questions,
Right.
and I have some questions I could ask you. So first thing, in my years of life and um hobbies and jobs and moving and growing and things from there, you notice either a trend or you notice that sometimes you outgrow the things that you're working on, or you move beyond what possibly you can offer it, or it's moving in a different direction than you'd want it to as far as that goes, and you find yourself doing something else, or developing something else, or going somewhere else, or finding another position somewhere in the traditional workforce. So my question is to you specifically, what were those what's the word I'm looking for? What were those things that motivated you in a situation where you were at IOHK, and then in a situation where you were at the company that later turned into Chainlink? What in those positions where you helped develop, where you moved it forward, did you say to yourself, you know what, I want to try something different, I want to move on to something? What was a catalyst for that? What, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, maybe you didn't have a choice, but I'm just curious at least those two circumstances where you were at IOHK or IOG and you moved on, and then you did what turned into Chainlink, and then you moved on and you decided to bring forward Ergo. So what were those catalysts there that made you either feel like you outgrew it or whatnot?
Uh, yeah. So yeah, smartcontract.com, which then pivoted into Chainlink. So it was actually a pretty annoying small startup with just 3 people on board, and always pivoting, and yeah, so it wasn't that amazing experience, to be honest.
Would
And
you say all this
well, it
pivoting you
was
said? Would you say pivoting?
pivoting. Yeah, so it's moved from one idea to another. So at some point initially, I believe around November 2015. So it was about writing some JSONs on NXT blockchain, uh, with some execution engine planned, I believe. But then, yeah, so there was attempt to build some peer-to-peer network to execute real world contracts. So pretty much like Oracleize, but much more ambitious. And the Oracleize went to nowhere. It was some old Oracle startup from 2014. Yeah, well, I experienced like 3 or 4 pivots, so yeah, had a need to start, well, coding from scratch and so on. And well, yeah, it wasn't so even ambitious, right? And it wasn't big, it was super small and so on. So it wasn't like Chainlink, right? People imagine back in those days. So then yeah, they raised like, I don't know, 30 million. And then yeah, it was different story probably. But yeah, the same people. So again, Steve initially. All right, and then IOHK. So yeah, IOHK was actually a pretty amazing experience. A lot of well-respected people in cryptography and so on. So it was a big pleasure to work with Professor Cass and his teams, and yeah, actually a lot of super smart folks there. But then yeah, anyway, so it was time to work on Ergo after all. So yeah, well, but it was a bit sad to well stop participating in IHK projects, to be honest.
All right, all right. So how do you feel that Eric scratches that itch for you, in that you'll have a constant amount of, at least a clear vision forward, where you can not pivot so much, not completely scrap things and start from scratch and move forward, but at the same time, Ergo is completely kind of free roaming, where you don't necessarily have the kind of control you do over it, as far as your three teammates at smartcontracts.com. How do you see that working out for you, at least in the long term future there? How do you stay focused on Ergo? I guess my question, when it is becoming so more decentralized than the other projects you've been on.
Well, yeah, so I'm not following everything, right? And yeah, it's not possible to follow everything in the ecosystem. And I think with time, well, so I would be more and more focused, right? Having more narrow focus on certain things. So, but yeah, well, still a lot of greenfield possibilities, right? So, well, for years to come, probably, nothing to worry about. So, well, it's never boring.
Nice.
And yeah, so these days, yeah, as I reported a few times during developers chat, so well, I'm mostly exploring sidechains, right? Sidechain constructions and so on. But before, in previous years, so well, I actually made a lot of things exciting for me personally. Like first maybe Nipopo based bootstrapping, right? And then with UTEX snapshots with stateless clients done before. But yeah, it was mostly done by Catena, I believe. Yeah, finally, well, realizing log space mining, right, for the world, without crazy cryptography, which is not possible to verify probably, and so on. Yeah, a lot of chapters, right, to open and close. So yeah, light clients, side chains. Actually, at some point, Degen stuff was quite funny and exciting, like auction coin. And well, the tokenomic stuff, right? Emission contracts, and now, I'm finding them useful in some sidechain constructions, right? So, I've discovered some very interesting and I believe more secure alternative to BEP 301. Which is a proposal for Bitcoin, where miners are just blindly submitting sidechain block confirmations on the Bitcoin blockchain and getting rewarded by you submitting those blocks with an idea that those users submitting blocks would receive transaction fees from sidechain transactions. And then pay most of it due to market forces to miners, right? Main chain miners. But the security of that crypto economic monstrous construction is questionable, right? And so with some actually pretty lightweight things. So what can we do is to have a mission contract on sidechain, which will reward main chain, so Ergo miners for submitting sidechain data on the Ergo blockchain, right?
You don't
The main
you
chain.
you don't think transaction fees will be enough on these specialized side chains? I mean, if I'm going to be entering a specialized side chain that I want speed on per se, or I want security on, or I want like a side chain that's anti or protecting me against my value against AI or quantum computers. Don't you think I might be more willing to pay an increased transaction fee on these side chains, to where those increased transaction fees may be enough to fund miners on those chains?
Yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. So even Bitcoin security in the presence of transaction fees just is questionable, right? So it's the big unknown. And for sidechain security, well, it's probably the same, but there is no any security analysis, to be honest, of BP301. And actually, when I worked with Agelos and his team back in IHK days, so we worked on Nipopos at some point and investigated. So that was a task to me actually to find security analysis for different early cross-chain constructions like Cosmos IBC, which was announced. I found some documentation, but nothing in regards with security, no in analysis. And I actually made the same thing just a few days ago, and it's still the same for Cosmos IBC, for Polkadot, so so for BAP 301. So there is no any security analysis, right? There is no any model even we can talk about. So hard to say anything about transaction fees. And some possible attacks, right? When someone can maybe pay more than transaction fees, right? But then do double spending and so on sidechain, right? Committed on the main chain. Well, so something like that. So yeah, I don't know. That's totally missed.
What's the issue with double spending on the side chain? From my understanding, at least how Hydra works with their semi side chain is you essentially have to bring your store of value over to that side chain first, and then you can utilize it on the side chain, do whatever you want, and perhaps roll it back up to the main chain. Or is that not how some of these side chains would function?
Hydra.
No, I mean just sidechains in general. Don't you have to essentially move your store of value from the main chain to the side chain to utilize it and then bring that store of value back? It's not like the side chain can automatically grab from that store of value, use it, and then put it back, or is that how is this being designed?
Yes. So BP 301 is not about that, right? That's about BP 300, right? So then it has a notion of how's it called? Hash signatures. It's about transaction bundles, right? To be basically approved by miners, right? And if for actually very long periods of time, most of hash rate is voting for a transaction bundle, then the transfer is happening, right, to and from sidechain. In this regard, in Ergo, it's efficient. That there is no need to introduce anything into the at least. So the Ergo hack sidechain presentation is describing the construction with it's voting like in BIP 3.0, but you can set individual parameters basically for every transfer. But then, yeah, there could be a lot of options. So you can do, you can modify contracts to have something like BIP 3.0, right? So, well, majority of mining for a long period of time, or you can be more aggressive and so on. Then yeah, so if time period is long enough, and yeah, most of miners are voting for them, it's probably secure. But that's a crypto economic part when yeah, miners are blindly submitting something right on the main chain that's required for did security analysis, I believe, because well, in this case, miners are actually submitting somewhat they're not aware. It's so in the 301, so miners are not running sidechain nodes, right? So that they're just receiving sidechain logs and committing on the main chain, and yeah, getting rewarded from sidechain
The side
validators,
chain.
suppose.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, but they are not validating anything, so they basically time stamping, right? And getting paid for it. And well, in this regard, well, the security, right?
Yeah.
Security analysis is needed definitely. So how secure is this economic construct when miners are just blindly submitting something?
Huh.
And well, if you have emission contract on the side chain, right, which is rewarding miners, so still they can just do maybe SPV client, right, for side chain, not doing full blocks, but just basically having trust in majority of mining power on the side chain if it's about dedicated mining. But still, it's looking, I believe, right, when it's about well, dedicated emission contracts. So it's more or less like mining rights, but yeah, well, with a bit different security assumptions, but more clear than BIP 301, I believe. So yeah, going back to Degen stuff and so on. So yeah, well, actually, a lot of serious things appear right after some simple experiments. Yeah. So we start with well things, right? I'm exploring like light clients, and then the different contracts, tokenomics, Degen finance, like that, right? And so yeah, well, it's always interconnected, right? So well, very serious things actually influenced by
Yeah.
some.
The question is, where does Degen finance stop and in traditional finance take over there? I mean, there's quite a bit of overlap, especially in what you've come out with and what other people on Ergo have come out with like auction coin and those kind of things. It's it seems degen, but then it's completely functional and completely um the opposite of that. So yeah, where would you say it's easier to start these kind of things with a degen mindset and then use that as kind of a platform to test and sample and then move out from there? Is that the intent of your kind of degen offerings when it comes to these traditional finance tools on Ergo?
Oh, that's not right. So well, even Bitcoin emission, right? By its time it was purely Degen, I believe, right? So just imagine monetary principle. You just have halving every 4 years. I mean, for what reason? And yeah, I mean, usually, so in traditional finance, you don't have anything like that, right?
True.
So if you are doing, if you are, well, any kind of financial instrument, right? So you are not doing anything like that, I believe.
So what was your
So
ambition for doing that with Ergo, with making these halvings, essentially reduction in emission rewards? I mean, the intent of that is to incentivize, well, you know, the price is going to go up eventually, right? And it's to incentivize less mine or less rewards, less selling. What was your intent there? Just to repeat what kind of Bitcoin's model was there, or was there actual separate thought beyond that?
well, more or less repeat, but you know, so the idea is that if you have some known emission, right, then markets are actually around that. So then, yeah, well, Bitcoin, well, emission. So I believe that was just experiment, right? After all, so kind of Degen finance. And then, you know, well, actually, sort of religious cults appeared around with Bitcoin maxis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, finding sacred meaning in the emission curve and so on. But we also have markets, right, which are perfectly organized around halvings and so on. And yeah, well, it's actually a pretty interesting phenomenon, actually, I believe, and maybe economically, right? So when you have some stable thing like Bitcoin emission with how and so on. So markets are building around that, right? And that's true for Ergo, right? So will be true in years at least.
And you have some issues where there's double coins minted, right? Accidentally, and they have to deal with that too. I forget what that's called.
Bitcoin, you mean?
Yeah, it's a Bitcoin that you can accidentally have like a separate coin minted when it's not supposed to.
So Bitcoin had emission bug, not emission, sorry, overflow bug. So that's a bit different. Any issue with emission, but I forgotten what was the maybe overflow as well. So then they had oversupply and a pretty big oversupply at some point actually.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, there was also other private work cryptocurrency. I forgotten, Heaven maybe. So they also discovered some emission bug. Well, with private coin, it was even more disastrous.
Is that one of the reasons?
I believe it was
Is
Heaven.
that one of the reasons you decided to put all of the Ergo mining rewards inside a contract, a smart contract, specifically to avoid that reason, that occurrence?
Uh, Yeah, in particular, so it's actually easier to test, right? And, actually, so you don't repeat yourself, right? So if you do safe arithmetics for smart contracts, then yeah, it's also working for emission, right? So well, no need to duplicate the work. So to do safe arithmetics contracts and then safe arithmetics for emission, yeah, you can make mistake, right? Double chance for it setting where you have duplication. But also, it was pretty much like when we started this contractual layer, so we started to think what's possible to do, and then yeah, maybe it was Catena. So he asked, can we do a mission, right? And then yeah, I started to draft a contract for that to have some precise answer, right? So if you have contract, then yeah, it's doable. But then I believe so at some point I still believe that this is of alternative to the situation we have in programming languages, right? So for a programming language, so number one goal is to write compiler for that, right? So yeah, it's almost necessarily for any new programming language to do a compiler for self, right, in that language. And I believe it's more or less the same. So, well, if even emission in a currency is not done via smart contracts, then do you really have contracts, right?
Right.
Can you really call it smart contracts platform, right? If you have some separate code for such a simple thing as well, emission contract.
No, I think that's a good testament to Ergo smart contracts, essentially putting your money where your mouth is, saying, look, we've got a smart contract platform and fuck it. All the mining emissions are in one and it's rock solid. So yeah, I think that's a great testament to the tech of Ergo at least. So the other day, not the other day, a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, I don't know, time all blends together for some reason. You put something on Twitter that I think some people took from it what they wanted to, which was good in that way, but I think it had a deeper meaning to it that maybe people missed. And I just wanted you to speak on that a little bit. You said something to the extent of Bitcoin is digital gold and Ergo is essentially oh shit, I forgot what he said already. He said something like digital gold 2.0 with smart contracts and other things are just something else essentially. So I think a lot of people may have looked at
Right.
that. I think a lot of people may have looked at that and been like, fuck yeah, Ergo's awesome. Ergo's what's next. Ergo's the coolest thing. But in my head, I feel like you didn't necessarily mean it that way. You weren't necessarily saying that Ergo's the best out of all these projects, essentially. Ergo kicks Soul's ass, Ergo kicks Caspa's ass, that kind of stuff. You're essentially saying, look, this is what Ergo is. Ergo is this store of value with smart contracts, and that's what it does. Other things are just who the fuck knows? It's whatever they're trying to do with what they're doing, but it isn't Bitcoin 2.0 with smart contracts, essentially.
Yeah, actually, that was the meaning. Yeah, well, I don't even understand most of so-called blockchain projects these days, right? So it seems that they're issuing tokens, people buying, speculating, but yeah, what does those tokens mean? I don't understand. Uh, Well, proof of stake, right? So most of those layer one projects, right? They're not even calling themselves cryptocurrencies, right, anymore. So there are some names like layer one blockchain project token, something like that. So some kind of new speak. But what does it mean? Why do you need for layer one blockchain token? What's the idea behind? I don't understand. I'm lost at this point. Do you have any idea? So, well, from my understanding, so you can buy some Well, basically voting right, kind of for governance, right, and proof of stake, and you also buying a right to get dividends, right? So basically staking. So basically you are buying shares, right, in digitally established corporation, basically.
Right. Yep.
Uh,
Y-
then the question is why those tokens are not securities, right? Well, if we are going to talk about legal side of things, I'm not a big specialist, but yeah, it's very clear kind of digital security, right? After all. So people are buying it because yeah, well, voting rights and dividends after, right?
All right. So building off that, Kushti, do you feel that Ergo would, how do I word this? Do you feel that Ergo would still be able to function as well as it does now and as freely as it does now if the price of an erg went to $500? Do you see any issue in the functionality of Ergo and what its intent is and what it does if the price goes to $500?
Yeah, so I think the protocol itself, right, and well, DeFi would work in the same way. Yeah, I mean, maybe some protocols, yeah, would see interesting times, let's say, but no more than that, right? So
So
yeah,
we'd have to
limiting.
potentially vote on changing maybe the TX fee. I could see that, right? Miners would have to organize to perhaps adjust that. If the TX fee was still 0.001 ergs, that could get a little expensive or not as expensive depending on what the remission contract was. That's what's in forefront of mind, but do you see it as, I mean, right now, what it's like cheap as hell to mint an NFT because of that. You have Dan's entire platform from Palmera based on minting a shitload of NFTs for tokenization of commodities. Um, you have what else do you have? Um, yeah, I guess that's just a general question. So you don't see anything that would need to be a major change if either in the physical working, digital working of how ergo contracts work and how the ecosystem works, all the way up to um um yeah, I lost my train of thought there. But so you don't see anything major issues happening there, depending on whether the price is what, $2 now or $500 in the future.
Yeah, well 1,000. So yeah, non different. So for takes fee, there is only one parameter which
Right.
could limit things a bit, which is minimum amount for transaction propagation. But actually, the Bitcoin is the same, and yeah, well, it's working right. Our price
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right.
spiked up, and yeah, and the parameter is individual, so there is no even to do a node update, right? So you can just tweak your node settings. So yeah, I believe so some mining pools can just readjust, and even this would be enough to, well, at least include such transactions. Right, because miners can accept any fee
Right.
basically, and
Right. So they just changed that.
currently they're accepting any fee. The only thing is that to prevent spam, there is some minimum for propagation, right? And yeah, that's taken from Bitcoin.
Right. Right. Okay. All right, so another question based on this. What
All
what's
right.
a what's a more ideal scenario for you as far as how the ethos of Ergo goes? Would you rather have, and I'm sorry this is more price oriented, but we're on the topic, so fuck it. As a utility, as a layer, as Ergo is its own blockchain, right? Would you rather see
Yep.
Ergo or Ergs at, the price appreciation as we see other tokens do or coins do and projects do as time goes on? Or would you rather see the price of ERG remain as a basic utilitarian price, as a kind of a utility fee, maybe what it is now, maybe a little bit more. And then the project prices, something like Rosen Bridge, have price appreciation, something like what's it called? Duck pools have price appreciation. These tokens on ERG be the price appreciation catalyst as opposed to the utility ERG itself. What's your ideal wish for that as far as that goes?
Oh, that's very interesting question, actually. Uh, yeah,
I mean,
I actually need to think
well,
on
I'll
this,
keep
but
I'll keep I'll keep
I
talking for a
believe
bit. I'll keep filling that in for a little bit. What do you think? Because in my head, ergo is going to exist no matter what. It doesn't matter if erg is $1 or $10 or 50 cents. The idea of what ergo is and what it can provide to the services that lay on top of ergo are beyond. There's nothing else that can come close to it. There's nothing else that something like duck pools can come along and create this amazing lending platform with a DAO based community controlled system on Ergo, and Ergo facilitates that. So in my head, I mean, it sucks to say and sucks to hear. It doesn't matter what the price of Ergo is, because it's still going to function and it's still going to be able to provide that base layer of amazing functionality, smart contracts tooling to duck pools, HODL Erg, Signify, Rosenbridge, that security. It's still going to be there. So in my head, it doesn't make too much of a difference, honestly. My investment can switch, whether I invest in ERG from an investor standpoint or I invest in a side project or a project on top of ERG. I can move that investment around depending on what I want to price speculate based on that. But Ergo is going to be Ergo. And the reason I'm here in Ergo is because of what it represents. The fact that we can create something like the Good Things DAO and provide support to other countries. And the tooling makes it easy to do. Yeah, that's what does it for me. So yeah, that's kind of the basis of my question.
it's we also have security here, right? And so I believe, well, for the best security, Ergo capitalization should be number one, right? In the ecosystem. Because otherwise you can have unexpected, let's say, at least games, right, with miners possibly. Uh, so just imagine that yeah, so we have a mission contract which is emitting ergs, right? And just imagine there is more success project on Ergo, right? And it's also having emission contract, right? It's rewarding miners. Then what could it mean?
Right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what tokens it's
And
rewarding miners, right? I mean, as long as it has a store of value for the miners, it could be, you could be rewarding miners in Rosen tokens. You could be rewarding miners in anything. We could make a DAO that says, hey, join this DAO and let's all contribute to this emissions contract. And every 1% of your project goes into this emissions contract and we reward miners with that. So, I mean, it could be anything.
it could be not so easy. So, for example, imagine that this project, right, more successful. So rewarding miners, for example, for including transactions, right, of this specific protocol. And then, yeah, it's a little bit different
Oh,
story.
that's a good point.
Yeah, net neutrality of the protocol could be broken a bit, right, in this scenario. And actually, it's just the simplest scenario, right? So, well, there could be a lot of games, right, when yes, so some projects can bribe miners, right, with more
But
success.
they can do that now anyway if they wanted to, regardless of the price of Ergo. They would just need to have a more incentive beyond what Ergo costs. Essentially, let's say a casino opened up Kushti, and the casino said, "Look, we're going to give you these casino tokens and a percentage of ERG in an emissions contract if you include these our specific transactions in your block first." They could do that right now, no?
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, miners can get additional income, and yeah, in the environments we are in now, miners probably would be happy to get any kind of additional income, right? But yeah, in the presence of a more congested blockchain, yeah, games could be quite different, right? So miners then can choose what to do. So which source of income is to ignore or not.
So how do we combat that? I mean, because it's going to happen, right? When the blockchain gets more congested, you're going to have projects that are going to necessarily want to be included in their blocks first.
Yeah, well, that's always happening, right? But then, yeah, so I believe then, yeah, so most of income should come from the basic token, right? So from ERC. But yeah, I need to think about that some more. But yeah, so you see, so here we have emission contracts, right? The notion, so that's pretty novel. It's very basic thing, I believe, right? So to have emission contract for native token, as we discussed, but yeah, in case of Ergo, that could be replicated. Well, we already had some IMOs, right? Fair initial mining of cases when miners got some additional tokens, right? And that means the gene is already out of the battle. Right, and at least those games are transparent, right?
That's true.
Those games are on the blockchain, so they're not under the cover.
That is true. But we all know that
So
people in large crowds are significantly more stupid than than people in smaller groups and individuals sometimes. The collective IQ of a group is significantly lower, I guess is a term I'm looking for, than the sum of its individuals. So you could have people coming to the chain like
yeah,
I don't give a shit. I'll just keep playing this game, or I'll keep doing this thing even though they're incentivizing their TXs to be run first kind of thing. It's tough to get the community collective to turn around and really fight something that is not good. It's maybe it's America specifically. I see the news on like in France where they try to up the retirement age by 1 year and there's fire and riots in the street. And if that shit happens in America, I mean, it has happened in America. Nobody gives a fuck. They don't want to get off their couches and do anything about it or anything like that. So it's interesting in those kind of situations. Why don't we talk about before we go into the dev update? Why don't you give us an update on Chain Cash? I see you made a special Telegram channel to start discussing it and invited people there.
yeah, because I'm also promoting it now a bit among Rust developers. So well, there is need to make progress with chain cache server development. So unfortunately, Rosware is now not very active there. Yeah, I'm currently inviting developers, and that's why this group is made public. Let's see how it goes. I successfully published pro links in some groups with hundreds of Rust developers, and I will do more promotion. So, yeah, server development could be done significantly faster. Let's hope for that. And the idea is we need to finish at least some basic things like creating reserves and doing nodes on top of reserves, right? And then we can start real experiments, even if that's about, I mean, just few hackers using command line interface or whatever. It doesn't matter. But with some experiments, it could be imaginable, right? So what's going on there? Because, well, my impression is that people don't quite understand what is this all
No, it's a
about.
big thing. It's a big thing to get your head
Yes.
around. That's for sure, especially without something physical that you can see it actually function. Yeah.
So then with some play tool, it would be the different story anyway. And then we can progress with making proper APIs, UI, and so on. But what I'm also thinking about, what I'm working on now, side chains, right? So reading about different constructions. So all those BAPs, relay contracts, zero knowledge, and so on. And then chain cache. And to me, this could be a part of a big multi-layer story, right? So if we are going back on what I can do in coming years, so this story is probably enough for the rest of my life. All right, so so see, we have digital gold 2.0, right?
Yeah.
Which is Ergo, right? Which is actually is GPU mineable digital list, right? What can we do? Also is to have different merged mine side chains, right? So experiment with different things, with even for starters, just trustless transfers, right? So for the industry, this would be already quite big story, I believe. Right, maybe experiment with other things such as I don't know, kind of exotic sidechain. I've discussed it with Joe. So some post-quantum sidechain, right, which could be used in case of quantum computers being appeared around to, exile, right,
Right.
from the main chain.
Ready and
And
waiting,
then so
ready
on.
and
So
waiting on the side. Yeah.
yeah, but what I'm also discussing, and Joe is pushing now the idea of chains. Side chains with minimized right, so-called with dedicated mining, mineable ASICs, right, or CPUs, and then you also grab basically different economies, right, of converting electricity into digital commodities, right? Because these days, the state of proof of work industry is mostly sad, right? So miners often jump on mining of Caspa, right? So, now in 2024, what could be an idea even to launch a blockchain without contracts, right? Such as Caspa and its forks. what's the value. And so here,
I don't know what the value is there.
yeah, so here you harness economies, right? So ASICs, CPUs, and so on. So they're all basically in regards with electricity, right? So different source, right? So GPU mining is still about some small scale firms, right? Mostly and so-called bell mining and so on. CPUs, I believe, is mostly about enthusiasts, and then yeah, let's build bots and also data centers which are using some CPU they cannot use in servers anymore, but yeah, those CPUs are good enough for mining.
So how would Kushti? How
And
would
then
that?
ASICs, so sorry, and ASICs got some big electricity, right? Like hydropower plants
Yep.
and so on. So there are some hydropower plants built for mining, and so you can have different side chains, right? But Ergo contractual layer Sigma with trustless or trust minimized to say precisely pegging, and then yeah, so you can have DeFi since day one on those chain, right? And cross-chaining Ergo, right? So and but I think that so you well, possibility to create more collateral for DeFi, and then also for real world economies, right? And well, for creating elastic money supply for the real world. So then yeah, you have chain cash, right, on the upper layer. So that's quite big, right? Very ambitious,
Yeah.
multi, but
I'm still trying to process
yeah,
all that together.
the
Sorry, go for it.
yeah yeah. So that's about using well Ergo's contractual layer, right? To harness well different power
Right. So
uh,
you're saying these side chains would
kinds of
exist.
mining.
These side chains would exist to allow a separate tier of mining depending on what miners are being used and what the purpose is and what electricity is available to these miners. So you're saying with hydroelectric dams, essentially you could run a bunch of ASICs on it on a side chains with data centers that already have CPUs in them. You could do another side chain with CPU pure mining, as well as GPU. But what's it look like when it comes back to a store of value when you're creating stores of values at different rates on different chains, side chains? How does that look like coming back to, the original layer? Is that just some arbitrage madness going on, like just at massive scales of economy there, or how's that look? How do you envision that looking?
Yeah, so even with different kinds of mining, so well, uh, well, even so-called DeFi, right? So what we do have now, so kind of isolated, well, digital teams with tokens, right? So it already well will consume, right? It is already consuming all the collateral rights in form of tokens. But yeah, I believe proof of work till the king, right? And then yes, you have Ergo DeFi, right? So cross-chain and so on. But yeah, so you need actually a lot of control for the real world needs, right? So well, along with tokenized real world assets, which is well also big story, but not trustless, right? So I I think it could be quite good, but I'm not in that because well, it's always based on some trust, right? We are in crypto, so always try to well avoid trust, right, in something which is not observable. So then yeah, so for the real world you need still need a lot of collateral, and then yeah, so for things like chain cash, and I believe there will be more designs of DeFi appearing and so on, because after all well those things would be isolated, right, in the long term.
Will
From the real world.
will
I mean,
chain cash need some sort of utility token to function?
no. So, definitely, as it is using gold unit of account, so there is need for gold oracles. So, well, contracts are already paying actually to gold buyback contracts but that's just about the current contracts, right? And so the idea behind the chain cash is that you can combine kinds of contracts, right, in a peer-to-peer environment. But yes, those original using gold oracles. So yeah, well, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't not used years later, right? So they still be good and so on.
Right. Right. Are you planning?
So the yeah, so probably chain cache will create by pressure on gourd, right? Like Dexia, but that's not mandatory, right? In this protocol. Well, in regards with some tokens, so I don't see need for any new token here. Well, if we are not talking about for market on, right? So
You mean Kushti,
well,
you don't want to set up a big fundraiser and sell a bunch of tokens 10 months, 12 months before your project even has some code written on it? Is that what you're telling me?
yeah, so I had a call with one yeah, I believe pretty big crypto fund, right? About 10K specifically, right? Because well, a friend of mine connected after my recent video appeared. And so, well, yeah, so after all, the question was, yeah, so what would be a token behind that? But yeah, I don't have any idea what one is needed here. Well, as usage of Oracle Gold Ore, right, there is an pay to pool. But that's only for Crux where this Oracle pool is used. So maybe with new options will appear how to get this price of gold, maybe from well some trustless sources, right? And also free sources or something like that. So yeah, well then. Yeah, well, there is no any chain cache token, and
Kushti
yeah,
was
I don't see I don't see any reason to introduce it. Then yeah, well, the question is how to do well normal crypto business right on top of it. Uh, so I don't yeah
Wait, so
that.
Kushti, what I'm hearing is that what I'm hearing is that smartly chain cash relies on gold. All right. So, because gold's not going anywhere, obviously. Um, am I am I jumping the gun here and thinking that you created you push forward Oracle 2s with gold pegging and Dexy gold singly for the purpose to be able to then go forward and do chain cash? Was that your vision all along? or were they two separate things that you just decided to use together?
They're all really separate here, right? So well, all the things interconnected are all. Yeah, for all stable coins, like Sigma USD, right? Which are really back, or even more right, in case of CSD, significant excess in risk all the time, basically. You can create probably in supply for the needs of the world, right? So in the real world, you have fractional reserves, even for Federal Reserve System, for example,
Yep.
banks
Unfortunately, yep.
issued back in 19th, so also on fractional reserve. And yeah, and historically, for reserve systems so outperformed full backed reserve systems. Right, that's impossible. Nor, but what can do better is to basically have things been transparent, right? Thanks to the blockchain, to the common ledger. But then, in case of chain cash, so that's actually about your own risk profile, right? So whether you trust fractional of some agent or not, right? So then maybe have trust in notes issued by me, or maybe not, right? Maybe you're accepting notes without any reserves attached, issued by a hacker, right, or some other community member, or maybe there could be some core community circle, right, whitelisting each other. So kind of a local exchange trading system and so on. Right, but outsiders, you can have strict rules, right? So if some guy appearing out of nowhere and presenting you notes, then may require them to be backed or over collateralized or whatever, right? So then it's kind of system where the trust and reserves are combined, but it's your own choice, right? Which risk profile is to choose. And unlike fiat currencies, so the system is not enforcing you, right, to accept risk profile. So in case of fiat currencies, you don't have choice, right? So you're just accepting
Yep.
rules of the game, and here, you have your own rules.
Sure. All right, Kushti, what do you say? You say we move
Right.
on to the dev update?
Probably everything is covered. So and then you see all the things interconnected here, right? So
Yeah. But
you
it
have
wouldn't.
D,
Kushti,
which is not yeah, sorry.
sorry, I'm just saying
You
it wouldn't surprise me if you spent 8 months working on some huge thing just to do some other little thing, and then that was just my thought process at the time. That sounds like a Kushti thing to do, to just develop something so that you could step on it and to develop something else on top of it just to get you to that goal. Just a little 12-month long project to get you to something else, Kushti, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you have something like Sigma USD, then DEXI, right? Then Chain Cash. I mean, the different stories. So actually going to different directions.
Mhm.
But yeah, well, after all the things are connected, and then yeah, the same is also Chenka as the way to do monetary exploit on top of in-based collateral. Then digital gold point oh, which is also connect know your action treatise, and then yeah, so side chains as a way to do some conservative expansion of good quality collateral, and also experiment with different features without breaking the Ergo protocol. So yeah, I mean, all the things after all, connected.
What's your first sidechain going to be to test? What theme, essentially?
Don't know. So, yeah, there are some thoughts I'm currently discussing with people around. So, in regards with concrete development, I'm pretty limited human being, as all the human beings after all. Yeah, my idea is currently I'm working on 6.0 EP. It's not in the dev yet, but yeah, it will be announced. And the next one maybe with a draft. I already have half of it. Sigma 6.0 EP, I will do some features for it, but yeah, the need for other developers to jump on that as well. In regards with sidechain, so I'm currently looking through the code, thinking about refactoring, and but then yeah, the developers need to jump and do some things like features for sidechains and so on. And I would polish a bit contracts, and probably put some developer on doing tests for them and so on. Yeah, these days I'm trying to delegate whatever possible. It's not always working good, but yeah, anyway, that's the only to decent things, right? And, to have
Yep.
developers, community thriving and so on. And yeah, overall, things are going quite well in this regard. All right, so let's jump chat.
Sounds good. Let's jump in. Why don't you take Luivatra? Why don't you start right off?
Yeah, now maybe it's your turn to talk a bit. I'm already a bit
All
tired
right,
of
fine,
talking.
fine,
So
fine.
yeah, tell us, Paideia. You are testing new features, right?
That sounds good. Yeah,
Louis is
yeah.
talking.
So Louis got Crux going on. Accounting section went live. Paideia, he's working on improving the authentication part to incorporate lessons learned in our other projects. Lessons learned? People learn lessons? What? Made generic function for contract to be spent into a new UTXO either with new position proposition bytes or if difference in creation height is more than around 3 years. Registers and tokens should remain the same. Value must be more than current value minus small fee. He's got an explanation here of what he did. I'll save you the breath. He removed one remaining unfinished feature, and after that, I will port to EIP 5. Contracts have constants at the top, so contract work will be trivial. That's what everybody says, but off-chain code might need to, some changes to accommodate EIP5 contracts. So Padilla is working pretty well, Kushti. There are some bugs, mainly UI bugs that we experience, but that's it. Nothing too serious. We've surely given Luivatra so much feedback that he told us to stop giving him feedbacks in any channel other than the Padilla Discord. The support to the dev channel or
Correct.
whatever it was. So he steered us to that. Yeah. All right, I'll do the next one too. You do, then you can do your own after that. We've got ES Script Online. Copy as HTML lets you copy the smart contract as a little HTML widget. Oh, cute. That's really cute. Feel free to reach out if you have any integration issues, needs, or special requests. At this stage, it might be useful for Ergo Docs. Not sure. Hope to see some more projects use it to display the smart contract directly on a project website. Super neat. Super neat. Kushti, we've got you. You got a nice big update
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, well, most of it already, I believe. So, and cache covered. Yeah, the doing slides for Ergo Crux in Cap's presentation. Done actually all. So hopefully I will record video in coming days. Then yeah, for 21. Actually, I finalized something for reviews. Will release on month 5 or 21. Yeah, need to test it 5.0 with SDB. And, yeah, so it also will be released next week, hopefully. Around Wednesday or Thursday, something like that. Made likely last issues for Sigma 6. That's related to the EAP. Covered briefly, and yeah, so those issues also needed for Lithos actually. And yeah, also one of them is needed for side chains. So yeah, well, the overlapping thing. Some on Sigma on. Yeah, so Dexia, so finally as you missed, so there is a halving of operators rewards, right? Because there is also now defamation contracts getting half of issued. And yeah, also there's another in addition to Gordon contracts, so buyback contracts. And yeah, going to issue remaining contracts in days. There are us to consider such. Well, there will be a possibility to wait the ban contracts, I think, to burn the key after a few months. So, well, there is need to things better than was in Sigma USD. So, yeah, on mod burning moment will be decided before protocol launch, and well, probably the next thing to issue update tokens, then to deploy bank and then LP contracts on the mainnet. Then yeah, so some news from Gleon team. There is Gleon tech going in the testnet, so please help with testing. Gleon is an coin which is to gold. It's instance. It's basically creation of the protocol, but with a bit different. So yeah, please help with testing, and then yeah, or the next.
All right, cool.
Please.
We've got Nautilus team update. Captain Nemo, version 0.93.3 released. That included a handful of icons that they were going to do that were submitted. Manifest version 3 migration is demanding a full extension DApp bridge module rewrite, which is really hard to test. So going slow to avoid future breaking releases. Migration process is going well, taking advantage of this to rethink some structural designs and now looking into modularizing chain integration to make cross-chain expansion easier. even for outside contributors. Yeah, so right now, Nautilus, if you want to add an icon to Nautilus, you do a git pull and they have to rebuild the package and push it up to um, Google again. So it's not ideal. So they're working on a method to not have to do that anymore, essentially, which is great. Fleet SDK, adding library agnostic provide prover and verifier methods. The idea is to provide a built-in simple and blind signer verifier and allow adapters for third-party libraries like Sigma Rust and Sigma JS for more complex scenarios. And I asked Marc in chat today, Kushti, maybe you can remember. It seems like MEXC might be the first central exchange that's going to be trying to utilize Fleet SDK as opposed to just your typical calls. Is that do you recall any other central exchange that uses Fleet SDK that integrated us?
No. So yeah, I think Maxi would be the first one. Xegex, I believe, is just using the node, like Trader is doing, as well as on KYC. Yeah, let me think. I'm not sure any exchange is using Rust, even something like that. So there were exchanges did offline signings. Doing our leave, not serious even. So
Cool.
I'm not sure about all the exchanges, but yeah, that's true. And yeah, for fleets, yeah, that's the first exchange.
All right, we've got Blitz. I can take that so you can rest, Kushti. He's gearing up for a pack launch sale in 2 to 3 weeks alongside of Marty. He's got a video guide coming out closer to release day. He'll make sure everybody knows. LGD is close to completing all related burn contract development. If you guys didn't know, part of Blitz, the big thing about Blitz is the ability to burn cards, which is super cool, considering that these are valuable things that you're doing it with. But it's a really cool mechanic. All 150 cards needed for release have been rendered, pending one final review for accuracy. He's ramping up marketing efforts as of this week. Look forward to more videos and articles. And I believe he did release video 1 of 9, I think, in the channel recently. If you guys want to catch up on that, I've met Mick at in Vegas last year. Super dedicated, super nice, super smart guy. Um, yeah, so it's going to be a really cool project. It already is. I mean, there's already Cannon's played it a little bit, I believe. I saw Mick play it at the Vegas, so super neat, super neat. All right, Kushti, your turn. Why don't you take MHS?
The new version released. So actually, I'm recommending to use it. And
Oh, it's fantastic.
if you're going to use multi-sig, then yeah, it's the only choice, I believe, right? There is another option which is about using zero knowledge treasury, but Minotaur. Yeah, it's more user friendly, I guess, much more. Then yeah, they're also working on a small science server for multi-sig wallet, which is a simplified option to support privates, right? But yeah, easier for users. Then yeah, the app connector is under development. Raffle version contracts.
Kushti, your network's killing you. So I'm gonna let me take this.
Handling
Your
and development
network's
of off-chain logics will get.
your network's killing you, Kushti.
Yeah, so
Let me take this. Your network's killing you. It's chopping off.
all right.
You there? All right. Let me redo this one. So Minotaur version wallet 2, as Kushti said, is fantastic UI, amazing. They're working on the signing server for multi-sig wallet, which I imagine means that it's going to make it a little easier for multi-sig transactions that come through to work together. Right now, right now for multi-sig, as Kushti probably knows too, we deal with Excel sheets. Essentially, I'll sign something, I'll create the TX, I'll sign it, I'll commit it. I'll put it in an Excel sheet. Somebody takes my JSON, puts it into their Minotaur, commits it, puts their JSON. So we go all the way down the list with the commits, and then we have to go all the way back up the list with the actual signs, and then the final person can commit, sign, and essentially publish the TX. So a signing server will be ideal if this is what I think it is, to be able to kind of work around that and have a little bit better experience there. Raffle 2 contracts are under refactoring and finalizing, and Unrosen updates will come later with details. In brief, Bitcoin Logic is finalized and they'll start its integration. The integration requires some modification and updates in the current infrastructure and core modules like minimum fee and a few others. Super cool.
All right, all right. So, by the way, do you know about Raffle version 2? Was that
You can do anything, right?
before?
Is it SigUSD you can collect in? What's the new thing with
Uh,
Raffle 2?
so support for multiple ads and yeah, I believe support for multiple winners as well, and
Awesome.
yeah, a lot of other features. So I saw some write up on that, but yeah, well, I believe it was private, so then I can say much more, but yeah, a lot of exciting features there.
Super cool. All right, we've got Mark the Shark with a Sigmanaut mining pool. He's working on the front end, making progress on version 2. He's doing a redesign and a reformat, hoping for a more smooth and responsive whatever device it's going on. Integrated rolling for average effort plot, and I don't know what he's doing here. QX fan club icon coming in the works. Backend, he's working on front page to mining interaction, locus integration for main container app, and some bottlenecks have been identified and looking to switch from each container querying the API instead of querying a database to reduce the load on the the Minecore server, so we can sustain over 1,000 users within the UI itself. When version 2, hoping to release a beta by end of week, looking for feedback and ideas. If you have them, reach out to him. There's his Disc Telegram handle. He's looking for ideas about what other NFT type ideas to drive the dashboard. Are you interested in mining governance and what tools you would like to see in the pool? Once version 2 is established from a formatting perspective, they can begin working on various ideas and tools for the pool itself. And bonus, Astoph is working on integrating the UI into a PRI with ePaper. Looking forward to that. Super cool stuff. We just bombed through a ton of blocks the other day. We went for like a 6-day dry spell, Kushti. It was rough. It was hurtful, painful. And I rented some hash just to make sure that our config wasn't screwed up. And sure enough, we banged out like 3 or 4 blocks right there in 24 hours. So that was a lot of fun to do. That's for sure.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah. So I think we're back up
So
to
the pool growing.
pool's grown. We're about at 14 gigahash, Kushti, 14 and 15 gigahash right now. Yep.
All right, nice.
Not too shabby. Yep. So we're slowly kind of creeping out there, getting people to come join us and slowly building up. As long as they're under as long as they know their assumptions, it's that they're part of a community and we're all building and learning together and figuring this out, then all is good. I think that's it. Cannon actually asked for some dev support. He's looking at starting this cool kind of betting protocol, which is neat. The field, he calls it. I suggest you guys read that if you
Yeah, yeah,
haven't read that yet.
yeah.
Seems super neat.
Yeah, actually, it sounds very interesting. So it seems some DAO kind of DAO, which is also about betting rights, kind of
Yep, yep, yep,
like prediction, the DAO based prediction markets.
yep. Predictions
Yeah,
on sports or
sounds
predictions
interesting.
on like indexes, index funds, and those kind of things. Super neat. He's got to get working on these. He's got to get oracles in line to bring stuff on chain, Kushti, right? He's got to get a dev to do that.
Yep. Yeah, sounds interesting. So
All right, what else? I think
I'll
that's it,
check
Kushti.
then.
Yeah.
There also was update. Yeah, so from Blitz also.
Oh, Blitz. Yeah, this is Blitz extra update. He's got this is the videos that I was talking about earlier. He's got 10 videos and he's posted one already, I believe. So check out Blitz, check out Mick's beautiful face, and and conviction, and be ready for when he's starting to sell those packs. It's going to be super cool. All right, Kushti, that was a long update. Might have to make some trims, but anything you got to say in closing? Any words of wisdom? Any fuck yous? You want to start some drama right now at the end, Kushti? Anything like that?
No, no, thanks. I'm actually tired of talking already. So yeah, a lot of words of wisdom and stupidity already said. So yeah,
Perfect.
maybe it would be good to wrap up this point.
All right.
Yeah, a lot of news coming. So I'm working. Recently, was it covered in previous dev updates? The last one. It's a chain cache video, right? For now, for general public. And yeah, I'm going now to do a video on sidechain. There was one I published at was Hackathon Summit, right, few months ago, and now yeah, there will be more kind of general video as well. So yeah, stay tuned.
Fantastic. Well, Kushti, you have 10 whole dev update episodes to rest up your voice until the next one where you're on. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good. All
All right.
right, so
All right.
bye everyone. It was my pleasure to be here again. See you in 10 dev updates. That's about wait, 2 months and a half, right?
You got it. All right. Thanks,
So
everybody.
that would be around June. So yes, see you again
All right.
soon.
Ciao, everybody.